You got to do what you can, but I can't speak that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another show with Neuro Advanced Academics Live. I am neuroeducator Shirley Posey, and we also have neuroeducator Dominique Yancey. And you are in for a treat tonight with episode number 2 as we discuss our history began before slavery. And we have a dynamic panel with us on tonight. So you want to go ahead and press that share button. We have a phenomenal group of experts tonight, and we're going to dive right into the conversation soon. So go ahead and share, invite some friends on in. If you have an educator, parents, homeschool parents, you want to jump on into this conversation tonight. Administrators, it's going to be excellent, and you don't want to miss it. So if you all want to go ahead and share to your page. Thank you for joining us. I see people coming in. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead and tell a friend. Go ahead and share with a friend. This conversation is going to be absolutely amazing on tonight. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. Your educator Yancey is going to introduce our dynamic panel tonight. So you want to go ahead and introduce our panel?
Absolutely. So actually, they're going to introduce themselves. I'm just going to briefly give their name and give them an opportunity to just expound on exactly who they are and what it is that they are bringing us tonight. All right, we will start off with Dr. Woods. Do you want to tell us just a little bit briefly about yourself, what it is that you do?
Well, it is my pleasure to be back here. I'm a little stunned. You didn't tell Dr. Calhoun and I that the color scheme was yellow tonight, by the way. I'm looking at across the screen at both of them, looking beautiful in yellow. That is the color tonight. So my name is Dr. Hyacinth Wood. This conversation is really important to me as a person that is from the Caribbean and multi-ethnic. You know, I hear this conversation and I have conversation about this all the time. I am at Imhotep Institute Charter High School here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am the proud product of an HBCU twice, and then a PWI also twice. But it is my pleasure to be here. I am the director of STEM and science, and I'm also an adjunct professor at Eastern University. I bring about 26 years of doing this. Don't tell anybody because they're going to try to figure out my age. Just for your information, it's 39. Just stick with that and just agree with it. But it's a pleasure to be back here with you to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wood. All right, Dr. Calhoun, tell us about yourself. Just a little bit about what you do, who you are.
Well, I'm Robin Elzia Calhoun. I am Albany, Georgia. I'm an instructional coach. I have been an assistant principal. I've been an instructional coach for literacy for middle grades for the Georgia Department of Education. I have taught at elementary and middle school, earned 2 degrees from an HBCU, Albany State University, where I did elementary and then, of course, educational administration, supervision. I also did master's at The Ohio State University at Columbus, and also I have done doctoral studies at Grand Canyon University at Phoenix. Teaching is my joy, and I just love it, love it, love it. And I am Black 24/7, 365. So this is an ideal topic for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. All right. So moving on, we will have Iija Sibley telling us a little bit about who she is and what she does.
Good evening, everybody. I am Iija Sibley. I am a veteran educator. I've been in education for about, I think it's my 11th year. Once you get past 5, you stop counting. So this is my 11th year. Out of my 11 years, I have been a social studies educator. I currently teach in the Atlanta public school system. I do teach 7th graders, and we are an IB school, so we refer to my subject as individuals and societies. And Iija, I have taught about Africa for 10 years out of my out of my career. So this is a very, an extremely passionate topic of mine because I'm the one who has to undo all the wrongs that have been taught to our children about who we are. And so I'm just really happy to be here and to clear up some misconceptions to the world about who we are as Black people.
Yes. All right. And that last, but definitely not least, we have Mr. Brian Keith Harris. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Peace and blessings, queens, and everybody who's watching. I'm Brian Keith Harris II. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I am a school leader at a kindergarten through 5th grade all-boys school in Washington, D.C. This is my 16th year in education. Spent some time as an elementary school teacher and then moved over to school leadership. I'm also the founder and artistic director of Sons of Freedom Dance Institute, which is an organization that nurtures character, builds social awareness and spiritual formation for Black boys through classical and contemporary forms of dance and movement. The founder of Cultivating Young Kings, which is an organization that provides training and workshops for teachers, school leaders, and school districts that work directly with Black and brown boys. And the author of 2 books, Freedom's Design, 20 Days of Empowering Black Kings, and the book, I Am My History. And so obviously, I am extremely connected to this topic because I believe that when we teach our children the rich history and cultural legacy, they have an opportunity to always wear their cap, confidence, awareness, and pride.
Thank you so much. Yes, yes, give it up. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are so excited, and we have been so excited about this conversation. And you were strategically placed here for many, many reasons. And our viewers, you can now see why. So let's not, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic right back to Noir Educator Shirley Posey, and she's going to go ahead and get us started. Again, thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Definitely.
Shirley, we can't hear you, my
Can't
friend.
hear you.
Okay, here I am. So that's why you didn't hear me. So first of all, I was over here cheering for you all. I was like, oh, that's my director of science. That's really the best HBCU there is Clark Atlanta University. You all didn't hear all of that.
Okay. All right with that. All right with that. I'm telling you how it is in the house. Stop playing with me.
Hampton is here too.
Ooh, come on, Iija. Stop playing with me.
All right, so tonight we are discussing our history began before slavery. And this is so important and so relevant, especially in today's climate. So just recently in Wisconsin, the school district had a bit of a problem. So they were in a little bit of heat because the middle school group there decided to give out a assignment to the students. One of the questions asked, a slave stands before you. This slave has disrespected his master by telling him, you are not my master. How will you punish the slave? So of course, a lot of parents were extremely upset about that. And the school district responded with, a lot of the teachers that gave this activity were not racially conscious or understanding of racially moral or stimulated conversations. So that is why this is extremely important, because conversations like that are still we're having them in 2021. So the first question I want to pose to the group is, what does Black History Month mean to you all? And anyone can jump in and dive in with the first question.
Okay, you said month, and my perspective is you can't relegate me to a month, any month. I am 12 months, 365, 24/7. So when you say month, that's disparaging. And sometimes as African American women, we are seen as an object of something other than a person of true value and worth. So Black History Month to me means that it's an opportunity, again, when I see myself in all of what we have created, I am very fulfilled and satisfied in knowing that I come from a group of people who managed wealth, who were royal in blood, and who had the stamina, the fortitude, the perseverance to endure. We are the ones who survived. And so therefore my history does not begin in slavery, because it's what I brought. I was the seed that was carried across the waters and allowed to fertilize, grow, and develop. And so I am the hope and the dream of the slaves. I am the one who built the White House that the 44th president resided in with black little girls. I'm the one who exists simply to say to other ones in like our HBCUs that, you know, the divine nine, and that divine nine was intentionally founded with purpose, for scholarship, for service. And so, you know, Black history means everything to me. It's the Black preacher who stands in the pulpit on Sunday morning and holds his ear, and, you know, he revs back and it makes the sisters walk the benches, you know, and the long prayers feel satisfied in knowing that I come from a chitlin scholarship. And so, you know, Black history means everything. Talking about scraps that we got from the Mrs. Dresses and made coverings to clothe our families. So Black history is everything. It's like there's nowhere you can go or anything that you can do that we have not touched, influenced, and have become. And so Black history is everything.
Also, if I can jump in, wow, so amazing. I think when I think of Black history, I think of it not just being an offering of knowledge about Black history, but I think it is an opportunity for our children to be made whole. We must understand that our children and we as Black people are suffering from a bifurcated soul. Our soul has been separated from that place inside of us that enslavement sought to kill. When you understand the soul, then you understand that at the seat of our soul is our history, our culture, our legacy, our heritage. And our history, culture, legacy, and heritage was separated from us. And as a result of that, our soul has been separated and broken, and our spirit therefore dead. And so Black history is an opportunity to mend the soul of our children and to awaken their ashe and awaken their spirit in a way that they have an opportunity to become the people that they have been created to be. It's important for our children to recognize that Black history did not start in 1619. So not only am I a survivor, but I am also a creator of civilizations.
Yes.
And so when children understand this idea and this notion that Black history is greater than just resilience and courage and having to fight through, but Black history is also a history of creators, designers, thinkers, beings of creativity. And because of that, our children can now see themselves through the lenses of empowerment and not the lenses of enslavement.
Wow.
I want to say that I'm thankful and grateful for Carter G. Woodson and his innovation of this, what started as a week into now a month, and his appreciation for Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. But I have to ditto what everyone else has said. I mean, as an educator, it's my opportunity. I teach 95% of African American children, so it is my duty to undo what all the wrong that has been taught to them about who they are as Black young men and young women. I have to undo that. I've taught Africa for so many years, and the first thing I ask my students, you know, what do you know about Africa? It's that place where they're asking for money for homeless children or for sick children, or for, you know, and so I have to undo that before I can teach them about the economic wealth of Africa. I have to teach them first that Africa is our home, is our home. I have to teach them that. And so again, Black History Month is my opportunity as a teacher to teach my children. And I call them my children because I have a responsibility to them as a Black woman. And I always feel that way, and that's how I treat my profession as my response. It is my calling, it is my duty. And that is why I will forever be in that place in my heart and in my spirit, because it's everything to me. As Dr. Calhoun said, it's everything to me.
I'm gonna let all of your wonderfulness happen and just keep it moving, because I know we have
Yes.
time. But sis, one of the things I will say to you though is, and I'm so sorry, with all the pearls. Okay. I will say one thing though. I will add one thing to what you said, and that is, they are your children, they're our children, and it is our responsibility, because as we know, life began on the continent, and we are the mothers of all civilizations. And for that reason alone, they are ours. No matter whatever the system says, no matter whatever parents says, Sister Shirley will tell you, I tell kids in a second, I don't care what your mama and daddy say. Between these hours, you're mine. And because they're ours, it is indeed our responsibility to provide for them all of the things that the system does not provide for them. So, for me, it means nothing. Because as Dr. Calhoun says, 365 days, unless you're a leap year, then it's 366 days. It is that history that is happening, right? And we don't get that day off, because we don't get a day off from what we look like, sound like, be like. So it's ours. They're ours.
Yes. Thank you all so much. So just to kind of tie that all together, 365 every day, all day. Black history is everything. Let's just take a moment just to sit up a little bit taller today. Thank you so much. All right, so we are going to jump in right to the next question. Beyond slavery and the civil rights movement, what topics should parents and educators discuss with their young people?
So if you don't mind, I will go first on that one, right? So, I was watching a National Geographic, which I've just cut my subscription to, because they were talking about Africa. And I don't have a problem saying that. They were talking about Africa and the building of pyramids. And one of the things that they discussed very wholeheartedly was the fact that pyramids could not have been made by Africans. It had to have been aliens. There were aliens that came from outer space and built them. So I canceled my subscription. I was like, really, if that's the kind of science you're doing, I don't want to hear it. And so my thing is, in schools, they teach ancient Greece, they teach ancient Europe, they teach all of those things. Why are we not teaching ancient Africa? Because as we know, we are in the current year of 6261. If you want to be correct about the year we're in, we're not in 2021. That is a Roman calendar. Our calendar goes back 6,261 years. Why are we not teaching that history? Why are we not teaching the formation of civilizations and how what we've done is actually now in other places, and they're accidentally, as I say, accidentally on purpose borrowed without permission, which is a very long way of saying stole it. They stole our culture, they stole our history, they stole our music, they stole our scientists, they stole our everything, and now they're passing it off as theirs. So we should do the same due diligence and teach our ancient African history, because then and only then will we stop our babies from believing that we did start in 1619, that there was something else going on, that there was bureaucracy, there was business, there was enterprise, there was trading, there was education, there was science, there was medicine. All of those things, they were there, and they came and accidentally on purpose borrowed without permission.
Yeah, I think that's so great. And I was going to include that as well, like the understanding that we created civilization. It does something to the awareness and the self-awareness of our children when we begin with helping them to understand that their ancestors are the creators of civilization. In my book, I have a little sentence that says, I am a direct descendant of kings and queens. And the reality is that when you think of being a direct descendant, you really think of you in some sort of way having a part of that creation of civilization. And so that's one piece that we should teach. But I also think it's important for us to include and to teach our family Black history. When we talk about our ancestry, we oftentimes talk about our historical figures and our historical ancestors, which is extremely important. But it's also important for our children to recognize the trailblazers and the people in their actual family who have been able to make major contributions to the family, to the communities. And as a result of what their family ancestors were able to do, they're able to benefit from today. And so it's important for children to learn that not only do I come from a rich cultural legacy that is connected to history, but I also come from a very rich cultural legacy that is connected to the people who have my last name. And one of the things that's so important for us to make sure that our children understand, it's also important in teaching about civilization that we begin to dismantle the ideas that many of the African civilizations were not innately African. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes we try to push Egypt to be a part of another continent, right? We begin to understand that Egypt is a part of Africa, but we also don't begin to understand that Egypt was not called Egypt at first. It was called Kemet. And that word Kemet means the black land. Not only do we talk about Kemet, but we also talk about Kush, which is modern day Sudan. Yes. If we begin to add these civilizations, what our children are able to see is, wow, my people were able to create these civilizations, as my queen just said, that included math and science and technology and government and all of these things that we see today that have been in a real sense separated from us or withheld from us. These are the things that we actually created. And so gives you, as you talk about, sitting up a little taller, when we begin our history there, our children sit up a little bit taller, right? Because when I know that I didn't just come from, like I said, resilience and courage, that's powerful, right? But I also come from creators who created some of the tallest pyramids in the world, right? 480 feet tall is the Pyramid of Giza. I mean, come on, And when you're connected to that, it really does something to children, and it causes them to think of themselves and the world around them in a different way.
And what could they do if they knew who they really were? Right.
Yes.
We talk about how they stole, all right, many things. They brought all the diseases, but they stole the very essence of the properties that we had. But it's one part of the properties they could not steal, and that was the intellectual property. Property is what they really wanted in order to build this country, which they did. They laid the cities, they laid the grounds, and they laid the buildings. They gave us the timepieces. They gave us everything we needed to know in order to maintain a civilization, because we did that. All right. You've already done, you can recreate. So the intellectual property, they could not steal, and it still exists. That's why if they can make you feel inferior, then they think that they have encapsulated your essence, your soul, but they can't take the inner part that was divinely bestowed upon us and exists, because we have a direct line with the Creator. That's why you want to hear our songs. That's why you want us to help entertain you and to soothe your ear, because we have that, because we are part of the creation. We are part of the Creator. So when I look at it, there is no American history. There is no world history without Black history. As a literacy coach, it was always mine to ensure that there was a diverse range of literature where we could see ourselves and see ourselves as the creators, as the inventors, as the people who were the thinkers and the doers. And we were the ones really who nursed their children at our breasts. Without us, they would have died, because we had the medicines, the herbs, all of those kinds of things that made people live. We played the songs that gave joy. And so therefore, we were the ones who really, when you talk about history, there would be no world history, no American history, if there was no Black history.
Mm.
If I can answer really quickly, just everything that everybody has said. But as a teacher, I want to encourage teachers to switch up the game, please, during
Yes.
Black History Month, because I'm all for the king and the eggs. I'm all for it, but at the end of the day, there was a whole lot more before that. And so I've given my students ancestry projects, as my brother has said. Go find your history. What is your family history? I've done that. It may be risky, but I don't mind taking risks for my children. This year my students are doing ancient African research projects. So please, teachers, switch up the game. From a parental point of view, allow your children to watch African cartoons. We started Pharaoh early, before he turned 1. He loves Bino and Fino, which teaches African history. On the African channel, they play all of the child friendly history about Africa. So I encourage parents to do that so that they can begin to learn all the things that everyone else here has said. They can start learning it early. I don't want to brag, but my child speaks Swahili, so I mean, you know.
Come on. I want to add too, like speaking of like languages, how important is that as well? That I was going to also say, I failed to mention, we should also be teaching about Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino, and Afro-Brazilian
Yes.
as well.
Yes,
Because
yes.
we also make sure that our children understand that the influence of African culture is not just felt in the Americas, right? It's felt throughout the entire world. If you even look at pictures of ancient Asian culture, many of those people have African features. Well, that's not a secret, right? Why they have African features? Because those Africans migrated to those spaces. When we think of Afro-Brazilian culture, we don't realize, we think that more of those African enslaved ancestors came to the Americas, but the reality is that they actually went to Brazil. And so understanding that our culture is not just relegated to the Americas is also important for our children, but it also raises the children in our classes who are Caribbean, who are Latino, who are children of color that may not necessarily be from America, right? But where that African influence is still felt today. That's also important for us to make sure that when we're teaching African American history or Black history, that we're also teaching the other influences that Black history has had throughout the entire world.
Wow. So this is all wonderful, right? So I want to go with something that Educator Calhoun stated. She said one thing that they could not take was our intellectual property. So that's going to lead us into our next question. In many Hollywood films, enslaved Africans are depicted as lacking intelligence, but this is not the case. Please discuss the caste system, skills, professions, and expertise that the enslaved Africans possess in their native land.
So I think we've shared some of those things, right? Like we've shared what our ancestors were able to do, the skills, the abilities that they were able to do to create these civilizations and systems of writing and math and science and technology. I think the idea of the caste system, meaning there is a group of people who do not have access to particular opportunities, right? And they have no way of ascending to this kind of invisible ladder to receive those quality access pieces of life, right? And so when we think about the way in which our ancestors are depicted, which is actually the way in which we are looked at in reality as being less than inferior, there is a book that comes to mind, and I cannot think of the author at this time, but the book is called Brainwashed. And in a real sense, what that book talks about is the ideology that in order for our African enslaved ancestors to actually do the task of slavery, right, to carry out the day-to-day actions of slavery, one of those pieces that had to happen was the conditioning process. And so their understanding of all of their might and their strength and their intellect and their creativity had to be stripped from them in order for them to actually comply to the rigors of slavery. The point is that they were brainwashed, right? The point is that that was a piece of propaganda that was perpetuated in order for slavery to continue. So when you think of the depictions that are displayed in movies regarding slavery, that just further perpetuates the idea that Black people in a real sense were so powerful that they had to create a whole system to pull us down and to pull us away from who we were created to be and who we were before 1619. And so when you think about how does that caste system translate to today, we have an emotional caste system. An emotional caste system is our children don't have access to opportunities to express themselves or to develop their emotional regulation skills, right? And so not only do we have the emotional caste system, but we have an educational caste system. Those at the bottom, who are considered in the bottom, those underserved communities are not getting the right resources that they need in order for their children to learn, in order for their children to be healed from the trauma they're experiencing. And so that idea of being brainwashed is something that has transformed to the systems in which we live in today. And so I think that that idea of like, you know, this is how they're depicted. Well, of course, this is how they're depicted because this is how the culture tried to brainwash our people in real life. So of course it's going to be reflected in movies, in film, because this is what happened in real life.
So the book was written by Tom Burrell.
Tom Burrell, that's it.
And you know, I'm gonna take you a step further than that, because I don't think we give enough credit for the average person right now. And they're not average because they're making movies. I think it's actually a whole lot deeper than that. I think it is actually still something being done on purpose, right? Because you know, it's one thing to say that slavery doesn't exist, but it really does. We can talk about that in education, right? If we put everyone into one little area and then don't provide them with, as you say, the resources that they need, then of course they're never going to succeed, right? We can talk about where we live, Lower Merion versus Philadelphia. Big contrast, and we're only like 5 miles apart, right? But apart from that, I think it's no longer acceptable or even plausible to say that that is what the depiction was and that is what it should still be, because we all know better. We all know what we're supposed to do. We all also know when to cry, right? You know, I talked to my students last week about the young man on the country western young man, #1 in the country. He did what he did. He used the N-word, but you know, whatever he felt like it. And then all of a sudden it was, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that it was going to hurt someone. You're 27 years old. At what point do you become adult enough to accept responsibility for what you're doing? It is the same way with movies. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly why, you know, and I'm gonna go one direction further, way left. They know exactly why they cast certain people to play certain roles.
Right.
Yes.
You may have someone playing Asian and all of a sudden they look a whole lot white. You may have someone who's African American who's supposed to be African American and they look a whole lot white. Or you may try to put someone who is African American in a role and then all of a sudden it doesn't fit. How does it not fit? And so we make choices, and unfortunately for African Americans in this country, they too are making choices. They're making choices not to say stop. You know, we talked about Cecily Tyson last week at our school, and she said very clearly, I did not take any role that demeaned women, demeaned my culture, demeaned my people. She made a choice. And at what point do we say it's time to make a choice? Because we can always say they are doing it to us, but come on now. When do we stand up and say, no, I'm still paying money to go see $12 for a movie ticket and then $25 for food to see a movie with someone who's supposed to be me but don't look like me? Or all of a sudden, you know, why do they have blue eyes? Now, I know offense, my son has blue eyes, but that's another conversation, right? That's a genetics conversation. But you know, why does Princess Jasmine have blue eyes? She's from the continent. And she wasn't even mixed blue. She was blue. So, you know, we have to understand that they're always going to depict people in a way that is beneficial to them making money. That's always going to happen. And at some point, we have to get to the point where we say, enough is enough, or start doing our own. How about we make our own movies? How about we support our own? How about we, promote what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
I think like that's why Black Panther is so powerful, right? Because it speaks to like Black futurism that most times on a TV screen or film screen, we don't get a chance to see our people in spaces that are not like relegated to slavery or struggle or stress, right? Like this was an opportunity for us to see what it would be like if we were in a real sense never enslaved, right? And so that's important to see those images, and what these images, that we do see do is they just continue to perpetuate that caste system. That this is a group of people that are less than, this is a group of people that don't have access, and also this is a group of people who they're being less than is because of their own doing.
Right.
Like that's a part of that brainwashing. Right. Like you're less than, not because we said you were, but because this is a part of the design, which continues to perpetuate that idea to our children that they are also less than.
Yes. Thank you all so much. So we understand that these depictions are intentional. Okay, just be real. The depictions are intentional and they follow the initial agenda. They have to continue. They can't just say, "Oh, hey, sorry." It's just not going to happen. So we understand that those depictions, they're very intentional. We have to be the ones to make the choice of whether we're going to say, agree with it or not, So our next question is, what are the 7 influential African empires, and how important do you think it is to incorporate this knowledge into the academic curriculum?
Do you want me to list them all or just talk about one?
However you want to answer the question.
So the first one that comes to mind is the Kingdom of Mali. And Mali was ruled by Mansa Musa. And when we talk about rich people, when we talk about rich men in the world, Mansa Musa I think he still has the record, and he's been in the ground for centuries. The richest man in the world. And so as I studied the Kingdom of Mali, it talked about how he just gave gold, this immaculate gold trade that the Kingdom of Mali had during those times, during his reign. And so that's one of the things the first thing that I teach my children is about these ancient African civilizations who were traders, who possessed so many different resources, and how they pretty much were rivals of Europe. I mean, European civilizations feared African civilizations. I mean, literally. And so I think it's really important that we teach our children that, because unfortunately, when you open a history book, the first thing that they teach our children is 1619. That is where they start our story, and it's so unfortunate, and I hate it. So when we talk about those slavery movies, like I remember like the last one that came out, probably not the last one, but I think it was 12. That was the last one that my husband, that was the last one that my husband and I went to the movies to see together. He said, "You know what? I'm done with these slave movies, and we should be done with that, because that's just not where our history starts. Period." So so I can't. Miss Lady with the glasses, I cannot remember your name. Oh, goodness. I'm so sorry.
3 glasses.
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry, Doctor. I'm sorry, but like she said, at what point do we stop accepting that depiction of ourselves? We have to play. We have to accept our role in that, and do better, and start teaching our children about where our history really begins. So the 7 powerful empires in Africa, that's my project for my students this year. So I'm really excited about them to do that, so they can learn something else, because it's not in the curriculum. They're not going to put it in the curriculum. Why? Because they don't want us to know. They don't want our children to know. So
when they talk about Iija, when you were talking about how the Europeans feared the Africans, that goes back to even Rome. You know, they had issues with the African kingdoms because they knew the power and the might of these men. And so it brings to mind, you know, Cush. And when you think about, these were the ones who even ruled Egypt, you know, which claim you know, Egypt is not a part of Africa because it's so awesome because of the pyramid.
Yes.
You think about now, Cush, they ruled Egypt at one point. And so when we think about that, then how awesome-esque could they have been? And so our people dealt with gold. They were the traders. They were the people who made things happen. You know, you're talking about big things popping. I mean, big things were just popping. They wanted it. That's why they came from Europe to try to take it over, because they saw the richness of the land and the might of the people. And so that's why we were always a threat. So when I think of the kingdoms, Cush is the one that stands out foremost to me. And, you know, biblically, you know, we're mentioned about, you know, building our tower. And, you know, God came down to see because they were wanting to build that tower up to the heavens.
Right.
And it was like, let me go. No, black people, black civilization, builders. And so we are the masons, all right? When we erect our churches, we set that cornerstone with the rituals of the masonry. They come because they are the stone builders. Those are craft, that's the intellectual property that was brought with us in the seed, all right, across the Atlantic. And so it's indwelt in us. It hasn't gone anywhere. It just has to be reawakened. And Lord, help us if we ever wake up.
Yeah, I think one of the kingdoms that I think about is the Ghanaian kingdom. And I think about King Takaminen, who was very different than the other Ghanaian kings during that time. The reason why I bring that up is because three things. First thing, King Takaminen also was an amazing trader of gold. And so the Ghanaian Empire also, in a real sense, had a lot of gold. Not as much as the Mali Empire, but, you know, a lot of gold in that way. But also, he's important, King Takaminen, because he really brought into the empire this appreciation for art and sculpture, right? And I think about how that's translated to our people being amazing visual artists and sculptors, right? And how that love and appreciation for the arts has translated from ancient Ghanaian civilization to even today. That even some of the things that our children who don't have a connection really, you know, or knowledge of the Ghanaian Empire, but some of their artwork is so similar. And I just think that's such an amazing piece. I also think that King Takaminen is important because that's really where our understanding of democracy, he gave an opportunity for the people, right, to say what they wanted or how they wanted to be led. And when you think about a system that has used democracy in a toxic way, right, and rather than be a system that embraces the voices of people, it has been a system that has silenced the voices of some to uplift the voices of others. And so it's important for our children to understand these empires. And as we mentioned before, the things that happen in these empires, the ways in which these kings lived and ruled have direct connection to us today. But we can't forget the women, right? We can't forget Egyptian civilization. And we can't forget the first female Pharaoh, which is Queen Soba-Kneferu. The thing that makes her so bold and she's bad. And she's bad because she ruled all of Egypt with no king. It was just her. Like, that's it. Like, that's really a black girl who rocks. You're going to rule all these people, knowing that there are people coming for you. You are the commander in chief, And you are a beautiful woman. And she was generous, the people said. And so when our young girls realize, yes, it's Vice President Kamala Harris, but it's also Queen Sober Kneferu.
Yes.
And then followed behind Sober Kneferu was then Queen Hatshepsut. And she's important because she was the queen in Egypt that remained a pharaoh the longest period of time of any other pharaoh, men included. So not only do you have a first female pharaoh, right, who ruled single-handedly, but then you have another female pharaoh that ruled longer than any of the men. I mean, how powerful is that for a Black girl who wants to be a leader, right? To let you know you can be a leader by yourself and you can be a leader for a long period of time too. And so I think when we start sharing those pieces of these empires, that's really how our children begin to understand the richness. When we think of Mansa Musa is actually really Musa II. His father, Musa I, also created a ground for charity. And so when Musa II became the king of the Mali Empire, he had that charitable response. So that's important for our kids to recognize that in your innate being, you're a giver. He had all this wealth, yet we know that he was a giver. These things are things that are important for us to raise about some of these amazing civilizations that we oftentimes don't really look at. And the very last one is looking at Shaka Zulu and the Zulu nation and empire. When we look at Shaka Zulu, because most people who are not Black, maybe, I don't want to get in trouble, but most people who are not Black oftentimes look at Shaka Zulu and say, oh, we're not going to teach him because he was a very controversial person and he was a terror, and but the reality is that look at how powerful he was. And look at how that Zulu nation was always under attack. They were always fighting somebody, right? Yet Shaka Zulu decided that he was going to protect his people in a way that the Zulu nation of people are still people that are walking around today, right? Because of the protection of a leader who started this empire. So it's just not only important to share what those empires are, but the powerful nuggets and gems that come out of those empires.
The one that I would add is Songhai.
Yeah.
Don't tell my students because we're Imhotep and my class is Kemet 8, right? So don't tell them I love Songhai. That was my daughter's class. And I think it's important to talk about Songhai because I think too many of our babies, and this is because it's taught this way, they'll be like, oh, Africa is just there. And, and I keep telling them, like, when I give them an assignment, I'm like, no, there are 53 countries in there. Find one. And we're going to talk about one. And I think it's important to remind them about Songhai, to put some perspective for them. Because I tell them, Songhai, that was bigger than all of Western Europe. I'm like, think about that. Think about how many people that was and how important that was, that you just have this one empire that's bigger than all of that. And so, it was really there. And for them, it's about understanding government and systems and provinces and governors. And, so even within all of this mass, you still had the wherewithal, you still had the knowledge, you still had the base, you still had the responsibility to divide that and let the people be managed, governed, whatever you want to call it at this point, in smaller ways so that they can actually do the things that they need to, right? And so and the other thing is, a lot of these empires, the thing that was focused for them was education. If you look at them, they started schools and schools and schools, whether it was religious schools like a mosque or whether it was just schools. And our schools were then copied. We talked about Mali. Mali had that huge, ginormous library that had like hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Which library has that right now? That was us. And so, yes, it dissolved, as do most things. Let's do most things. We thought we were going to dissolve 2 months ago with what was going on in this country, right? I mean, all things come to an end, unfortunately. But we have to remember from whence we came, we were powerful. We still are. And that stuff is in our genes. It doesn't go anywhere. It just gets traveled to the next generation. And maybe we'll see it shining a little bit more, Amanda Gordon, all of a sudden, this little peep squeak popped up and there she was. And now she's everywhere. We need to take our nuggets where we get them. But we need to plant some of those seeds more often. And so understand that. And Dr. Calhoun, yep, in the Bible, they talk about the Kemetites. And I keep telling our kids, Kemet is still Egypt.
Right.
And it's still on the continent because life started there. So, if you want to talk about the Bible, I got you. We were there. And that came long after us. So.
And when we talk about the Bible, we forgot about the empire of Axum, right? Like,
yes.
Like, yo, like that is the Bible. Like when you think Ethiopia, like that is the birthplace of like all of these biblical stories and foundations, right?
Yes.
And I think we have like made, just like Egypt, but we've made Ethiopia like disconnected from like African culture. And I think there's so much richness in like teaching those empires. It makes me excited to even say, I mean, for me, a grown person, right? To even hear as we're talking now about all of the extraordinary things that came out of these empires, and almost like these superhuman like things that our people were able to do. Like when I think again about those pyramids, I just cannot believe that people built these. Like, I mean, and they're still standing, that's like superhuman. I mean, that's superhuman. So we lit.
I just want to say real quick before we move on. Unfortunately, there are some people who still try to include Egypt in the Middle East, and I have to dismantle that thought from our trip, because you put the map up there and say, listen, let me tell you, I have to do a comparison map. Somebody's going to tell you that Egypt is in the Middle East, but I'm telling you that Egypt is in Africa. And I have to clear that up, just in case somebody tries to tell them a lie. I wouldn't say that word. Somebody tried to tell them a lie. I have to tell them the truth. And my son's name is Pharaoh. And when we named Pharaoh, a lot of people, well, why would you name him that? Why you want to name him that? Because they go to the biblical context of Pharaoh and the enslavement and all of that. But we named Pharaoh because we wanted to give him a name that means something in his African roots. No, I'm not from Egypt. I'm not Egyptian, but that is the name that we chose for our son, because we wanted his name to mean something. And I think that more Black people should do that. Not saying that David doesn't mean anything or Raekwon doesn't mean anything, but I do think that, sorry. I've been up for over 24 hours, so I'm sorry. But yeah, so yeah.
And some don't realize that there were several pharaohs. They only know of the one pharaoh who did not know. But when our king of this panel mentioned about Axum, and that struck me, because they were the kingdom who had the religious legacy. Just put a pin right there. They're the ones who had that that coalition with the Byzantines, so they could say that what is now the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had right there. And so when the other people say that we had no religion, no established religion, that is so untrue, because this went back, I mean, almost, what you talking about, 2nd and 3rd centuries? So there was this Christianity at that point. So, we always need, my daughter, that point where we can redirect, those who say things about us, but we've got to know us. We've got to dig into our before we can teach. My godmother always said, you can't teach what you don't know. So we learn. We have to make ourselves amenable to what is there. I mean, just for the digging, just for the asking. just for the research, that's for the reading.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I just want to put right there.
And one more thing, our king also mentioned the women
Yes,
who
Thank
that
who
was
you.
were
powerful. Yes.
that was very, because every African ancient African civilization had women who were
Mm-hmm.
rulers of the civilization, and those women led battles. Those
Mm-hmm.
women led
Sure
the
did.
economic operations of the kingdom. I mean, those women did everything. And so I wanted to mention that just not specific ones, but all of them had
Mm-hmm.
women who were queens and rulers of those kingdoms. So like you said, you talk about Black girl magic. We've been sprinkling our magic on this earth for a long time.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. Listen, if you are just tuning in, I'm sorry. Oh, this is so good. So if you are an educator, a parent, an administrator, you have lessons that you can build from this conversation
Mm-hmm.
alone from now all the way until 2022, right? So there's no excuse. There's so much to unpack in this conversation, so many lessons and curriculums to develop from this panel discussion alone. So we're going to end this conversation on this last question, and I'm going to ask that all of our panelists can answer the question, and then after you answer the question, or before, whichever you feel comfortable with, answer the question and briefly tell the viewers where you can be reached, where they can find you if they want to contact you. So the last question is, scientist Neil Tyson stated, "If you only think of me during Black History Month, I must be failing as an educator and as an astrophysicist." How does this quote translate into our conversation tonight?
So,
Well,
I'm sorry, Dr. Calhoun, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to talk about, one of the things that he was saying is that some engagements he had declined because he didn't want to be relegated to that particular narrow view of who he was and what he did and what he had to offer. And he also made a point to let us know that if we were not thinking along the lines of the science, the technology, what the future holds, and how we should be preparing ourselves and how we should be training our children to think beyond this world and to other times and spaces. I think it was important just for us to just know that we have to extend the mind. It's like elevate your mind. And that was to the point, I think, of which he spoke, that we can't just think of him as, himself. And I've had opportunity to really appreciate who he was through some of the interviews that have been on CNN. And he's had opportunity to share, the wealth of what he has learned and what he has to offer. And just that point.
And then
I am Robin Elzia Calhoun, and my Facebook, Robin Elzia, Elzia Calhoun, that is my maiden name. Email address, rlelzia, Elzia @yahoo.com. And I am on a lot of the other social media as RL Elzia and Robin Calhoun.
I think when I think about that quote and him, I think Dr. Calhoun is correct in that he doesn't want to be relegated to a box. But as a scientist, I think about the fact that he was probably the first African American that was an astrophysicist. And whenever I hear that, I'm like, I think he's telling us the sky is the limit. See yourself everywhere and in everything. There is nothing the only thing that stops us is us, right? You have to get to that mindset where I'm going to do it just because you told me I can't. That's where I am. And so, if you want it, it's there. Go get it. And so understand that he cannot step out of his skin on any day. So if you only see him during the month of February, you've been missing him the last 11 months, and he must have turned into something different. I don't know what that is. But he is not only a man of color, who's in science and doing all of these phenomenal things. He is all of the above. And our children need to see that they can be all of the above and not be limited by anyone or anything. I think it is our responsibility, just like we said this past summer, it is our responsibility to give them what they don't have and what they're being denied. Because as things change and as they change our textbooks and they change our theories and they change our whatevers, we haven't changed. And our children still need this education that is being taken out of the school. And so that is where he wants to be seen every single day, every single minute, 365 and 366 of your year, as doing all of those things, as being a person of color, as well as that profession or that genre. Why be limited? When we were little girls, we wanted to be ballerinas and presidents and doctors and astronauts all at the same time. Why did we stop? Who told us that we could not be? Look at what we're doing. We're mothers, we're educators, we're doing all these other fabulous things. The only people that can stop us is us. So stop. Or don't stop in this case. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Hyacinth Wood. I'm on Facebook. I'm still Hyacinth Wood. I can be found at Imhotep Institute Charter High School, at hwood, at IMHOTEP, charter.org. I didn't sing it, Sister Shirley. I always sing it when I do it. Or at Eastern, I'm at hwood1 at easternuniversity.edu.
When I think of the quote, I think of simply what I said earlier. If you want to see a notable Black person during Black History Month, then we're failing our children. I think that recognizing notable Black people during Black History Month is important, but I think the most important thing is that we have to teach them the intellectual contributions that our people made early on. One of the things that we know is that many of our students struggle in science and math. And I feel like if we teach them that as Black people, we are intellectuals in those two disciplines, then they will be more comfortable with learning science and learning math and being and flourish in those disciplines. Not just that, but just in all disciplines as well. So I think that we have to not just only recognize notable Black people during this time, but also definitely incorporate our success in math and science and any other contributions that we made in the ancient times. I am Iija Sibley. You can find me on Facebook at Iija Noir Sibley. I'm on Instagram at Please Call Me Gigi. My email address, yes, my friends call me Gigi. My email is ija.sibley@gmail.com, or you can reach me at my school email, ija.sibley@apsk12.org.
All right. So when I think of the quote, I think actually of another quote that Neil Tyson said, which is, we are a part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps the most important is that the universe is inside of us. I think that quote is directly connected to the quote that you shared, because when we teach our children that the universe is a part of them, right? How vast do you feel if you believe the whole universe is actually inside of you? And so I think that is such a powerful point to think about when trying to break down this particular quote, because when we think of Black history, we think of the vastness of our history and the vastness of the contributions that our people have made and the vastness of the impact that they have made and still are making. And that same vastness that our people have made and are still making also resides in us. And when we share that with our children, then we have an opportunity to teach them Black history that is not relegated to just a month. We have an opportunity to teach them Black history that's not relegated to just facts. And we have an opportunity to teach them Black history that is beyond even their frame of a scope of influence, but where their soul knows all too well. And so that gives us an opportunity to stand back and allow the vastness of all of our children, who our children are and are to become. It gives us an opportunity to stand back and watch them become that thing. And so when we continuously incorporate Black history and culture beyond this month, but just throughout the entire lives of our children,
Yes.
right? That it's a part of your everyday life, because you are Black history, right? Which is why he said the universe is a part of you. You are connected to this history. Look at the vast things that our children will be able to continue to accomplish. So I'm Brian Keith Harris II. You can follow me on all forms of social media at Brian Keith Harris, and go to my website, purchase my books. They talk a lot about history and culture at briankeithharris.com.
Thank you all so much, Dr. Woods, Dr. Calhoun, Iija, and Brian. Thank you all so much for what you have brought to this conversation tonight. Phenomenal. I cannot thank you all enough. And I personally will be going back to unpack anything that, because I feel like there was just some nuggets in there. There was so much, you know. So I am even myself going to go back and listen again. I have my notes here. You guys said some amazing things. So to anyone that is watching, I definitely encourage you to go back and watch it again. For your own, you know, your own understanding. Go and do some research on a lot of the points that were touched. Allow your children to listen. Have these conversations with your children. That was the point of this. Is what are we supposed to talk to our children about? How do we even talk to them about these things? How do we bring it up? Where do we begin? We don't want to just start at slavery. So where do we begin? It was all encompassed in this conversation. So I encourage you as parents, as educators, to go back, take notes, and build your lessons and grab your conversation starters from here, because there are so many. Just like neuroeducator Shirley said, there's enough lessons in here to take you all the way to 2022. And I definitely believe that. With everything that has been said, in the way that we can just dig into it and just go bananas with this information. I thank you all so much for imparting your knowledge, your wisdom, your passion. I just love the way that it just overflowed from each of you, the excitement that you all have for that. I can just see the passion in each and every one of you. And I'm so grateful. I appreciate you all. From a parent's perspective, from an educator, from a woman, just thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all tonight. And as it has been said, what are we teaching? Well, it's been given to you. So at this point, if you're watching, if you shared, there's no excuse for you anymore. You have the tools that you need. Go out and have these conversations with your children, with your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren, anyone that you meet, adults and children alike, because we all need to hear it. Teach them. And as Brian said, just stand back and watch the greatness happen. Our Black history is everything. It's everything. Yes. Everything. If you got nothing else from this, our Black history is everything. So I'm not gonna. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Before you give the last word, might I just say this thought? The word says that we are skillfully and wonderfully made.
Yes.
And so that is how we are to see ourselves. That's how we are to see our children. That is how we are to see one another.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you all. I really appreciate you all. So I'm gonna go ahead and share. I know she probably is, but my daughter's been sitting here watching, and so as you guys have been making points, she's like, period. Taking it all in. She's taking it all in. So I'm so grateful for you guys, especially when you started talking about the women being the leaders. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you all so much. So and that's why I say to any parents that are watching, definitely share this with your children, and then let the conversations just roll from there. Allow the conversation to just be open-ended from that point, and then just research from there and go forward. So that is all that we have for you all this evening. I am your co-host, Neuroeducator Dominic Yancey, along with Neuroeducator Shirley Posey, and we are Noir Advanced Academics. We invite you to like, share, and follow our Facebook page right here, Noir Advanced Academics, as well as on Instagram at Noir A Academics. And you can email us, contact us at noiradvancedacademics@gmail.com. And that is all that we have for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for watching. Thank you all for sharing and pouring your knowledge on us. And good night to everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. And we'll also put the information for all of our panelists, because a lot of people were asking and sending messages. We'll put all of their information as well in the chat below so you can reach out directly to them. Thank you all so much again.